You all ready to join me today in our trip to outer space?
Yeah.
Albert Shivers.
The Matrix doesn't happen.
That's very true.
Come along quietly or not.
They don't have to like it, but they're gonna see what happens.
Goodbye, wimps.
And now, without further ado,
from Albert Shivers.
The general concept is that creativity flourishes in an atmosphere of freedom.
Hello folks, this is Albert Shivers, and I am coming to you with another episode of the Planet Shivers podcast. On this episode, it is musician, singer, and songwriter Casey Raniero. Casey and I had a fantastic conversation that I am going to spread over a couple of episodes just so you can get it in the best way possible. I don't want to just bombard you with long 2.5 hour episodes. I want you to have the time to listen and check it out. Before we get to Casey though, I just want to do a couple of little news items for you. First of all, I talked about them last week on the podcast, but family of the pod, Isaac Wilson and his band Powwow, will be playing Froggy Days. That will last from May 12th to the 15th this year in Narrowsburg, New York. Narrowsburg is a beautiful town, upstate New York. Very popular for its bald eagle population. My mother was a photographer up in Narrowsburg later in her life, and she got a lot of amazing photographs of eagles and wildlife up there. So I've never been there for a festival. I imagine it's going to be great. It is on some kind of a campground. You can find all that information out on Facebook and on the internet if you just look up Froggy Days, and that's Froggy and then D-A-Z-E, as in dazed and confused, which you most likely will be if you're camping out for the whole festival. Powwow is playing on Saturday at 1 p.m. and there are 30 more other bands that will be playing as well. There's definitely be some music there for you. Also, more Powwow news. They will be playing the Pine Ridge Fest from June 10th to the 12th. I'm not sure exactly what day Powwow will be playing, but might as well check out the whole festival. You can find out more information on that at www.common-flame.com/Pine Ridge Fest. Powwow is a great band. Like I said last time, I've heard their music, know most of the members, and Isaac's my buddy, so go check out that stuff. Also, go check out the Lizzie Borden shop, where you can find some of my newest artwork commissioned on and about Lizzie Borden, as well as the artwork of a bunch of other talented artists. Many of us Staten Island natives, so that's really cool, represent the island. And you could go to LizzieBordenShop.com to find that artwork. And tchotchkes with Lizzie Borden on them. If you're into Lizzie, this is the place to go. And even if you've got a little serial killer proclivity, go check out the Lizzie Borden shop. You might find something cool. One of my pieces of art was put on a cutting board. And if you don't know the whole story, Lizzie Borden hacked some people up. So cutting board's pretty fitting. Lastly, next episode, which will be coming out soon, will be another episode where you get me all to yourself. It will be entitled Racing Saves My Life. And if you think that that's an exaggeration or me just trying to get you in the door and put asses in the seats, you will be surprised at how true that statement is. I went to a lot of detail blocking out this episode to tell it just the right way and make it interesting and entertaining, and I urge you all to check it out. It's a very big window into who I am and what the deal is, and how racing in general, not just one form, has been a constant string through my life and has helped me when times were really rough. In the meantime, you can check out everything else I'm up to on Instagram at Albert Shivers and at www.albertshivers.com. I have a new art show coming up this weekend at the Gamut Art Gallery. 6 of my newest pieces will be on display, as well as the pieces of some other fantastic artists. With all of that said, let's get right to this episode with Casey. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and you can find more of what Casey's doing. She's always performing somewhere, and you don't want to miss it. So get your updates on her Instagram page, which is at Casey Raniero. Now I'm going to spell it all out for you so there's no trouble. That is at K.C_RANIERO. At Casey_Raniero. Check her out, check out her music, and hear what she has to say on this episode of the Planet Shivers podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you on the other side of the conversation. Enjoy.
Tired of having headache pain, nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea? Try new Pepto-Bismol chewables, made in grape, peanut butter, and cherry flavor for family and kids alike.
That's right, David. And all this and more can be found at a low price at your local pharmacy. For our southern guests, keep a lookout for the new brand, Peppy Bizmilk. Must be 18 years or older. The purchase has to be apparent before overdosing. Do not take if pregnant with triplets.
You are listening to the first station on your dial, WCNW, operating on a frequency of 1,500 kilocycles in Brooklyn, New York.
I am joined today by Casey Raniero, who is a very talented pianist, vocalist, and songwriter, and a little bit of a visual artist too. Thank you so much for coming on the show and doing it.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah.
And for the nice introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. No, I seen you play first at the Old Mill Pub.
Okay.
Which was a really awesome place.
Yeah.
And still is. And really was impressed by her talent, both on the keyboard and in just delivering a song.
Thank you.
You know, I think that there's stages of being able to be on stage and to be able to deliver and put out what you want to. And I think you really have achieved that in just the few times that I've seen you.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
I especially appreciate the comment about my piano playing, because I didn't think of myself as a pianist until like 2 years ago.
Okay.
Because I started playing the piano just to be taken seriously. When I was 16 and I started writing songs, I just realized like you have to play an instrument if you're going to be a songwriter. And I had a piano in my house, so I just taught myself like a few pop songs to know the basic chords. And kind of considered myself a hack pianist, but a real vocalist for years. And I think that was the case for years. But you hack anything long enough and it does become real.
Yeah. Did you start writing songs first? What came first in your music?
So what really came first was I started doing musical theater as a kid.
Okay.
And I loved singing and being on stage. And to this day, I strongly prefer performing to being in the studio or writing or anything else. And my introduction to music was piano lessons in 3rd grade, but I hated the structure and I quit. And then I played the clarinet in marching band for many years, and I then got recruited to jazz band and I played the trombone. And so for a long time, that was the reference point and the lens through which I thought about music, was like marching and jazz band and wind and brass. But then I think the shift as a singer to like being a songwriter and like a pop artist as opposed to a musical theater person was when I was in 8th grade, I started taking voice lessons. And so I'm classically trained, and that's why I sound like an opera singer despite being a pop singer. But the culture of musical theater and classical and opera was very, very, very showy. and rather than artistic. And I do like being on stage is like I know a lot of artists that don't like being on stage. Like they just want to be in the studio. And I'm not like that, but I'm also not a showy person. Like I like being on stage because it's fun, because I like to feed off the energy, but not because I want to like be seen. I'm indifferent about that. So just naturally, I started to feel more at home around people that were artistic, but more on the creative side rather than the performance side. And so it just was very natural for me to be like, oh, like I have all these friends that play instruments and cover songs and do it in groups as like a social thing rather than a competitive thing.
Right.
Because like theater is competitive. And so then it was just like a natural progression, like, oh, I'm going to write songs. And then naturally they came out as pop songs because that's what I listened to. And I had a piano in my house and I had a bit of recollection about how to play it. So it just happened that way. But for a long time I was resentful because I really, really, like resentful at myself for playing the piano because I really wished that I played the guitar. But it just didn't happen that way. So it really just happened like the way it did. If I were able to have curated it, I would have curated my sound differently, but I didn't choose my sound. It just happened.
Oftentimes that's how it is.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I feel the exact opposite, in which I learned to play the guitar and really would have preferred, which is never too late, but would have preferred to learn the piano.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I
absolutely, like completely, I stand by that. Because a lot of my favorite music is piano based.
Okay.
Or like keyboard anchored.
Yeah.
And that's, they often say you can tell what instrument is meant for you based on what you hear first when you're listening to a song.
Yeah.
Like a drummer will have proclivity to hear the drums more than anything else, bass, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
So that's funny because I always, and I've done like half-hearted attempts to teach myself with, different levels of success. But yeah, so I could relate to what you're saying about that.
Yeah, I hear a lot of guitarists say that, and I understand how that is because I think generally speaking, the guitar is easier to fall into because it's portable.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge reason. But that's difficult for me to imagine feeling that way because the piano is the last thing that I hear. I hear the drums and bass first.
Okay.
And I really wanted to play drums when I was a kid, like for marching band. But my parents, they were like, oh, that's too loud. So we strongly urge you to pick any other instrument kind of thing. But now I play drums a little bit and I love it. And I think in a different life, that would be my primary thing probably. Because I loved upbeat like dance music so much. I'm not my target audience at all. But I've literally never owned a drum set. It's just purely logistical, circumstantial reasons. I'm a pianist.
I got you. So, has learning an instrument, has it affected your songwriting?
Like when I learned piano, No, but that's only because I did it simultaneously.
Okay.
Like my songwriting grew with my piano playing. Because the way I've always written has been like I would just come up with a chord progression and then the melody comes naturally and then just the words come like half naturally. Like I might have a hook that comes out of nowhere, but then I have to think consciously about the rest. But if I didn't, like before I played the piano, I couldn't write songs. It was like an intertwined process.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what is that process like for you of I guess we'll start with like what sparks the idea for a song in your mind.
Anything like it. So it used to be, it used to be like once a season for some reason. Like once a season, I would get a song that's like a hit, not really a hit, but a hit for me. Like yeah, like I want to play this in public.
Right.
And it was always subconscious. Like it would often be about not necessarily things that I was going through, especially because I was 16 when I started consistently writing songs. And to be honest, like what is there that's that compelling and deep to write about at 16? Like maybe something, but for me a lot of it was witnessing things or seeing like the surface level presentation of things going on with other people and then filling in the blanks, like half fiction, half observation. But it was self-explorative in the sense that like things that you witness resonate with you for a reason. So it was like subconscious though. It would always just be like, it would come out and I'd be like, oh, I think that's about this or that. Or sometimes it would be like a situation in my own life, had it gone differently, like a rewrite. It was like a creative thing for me more so than a directly expressive thing. But then when I did the 100 Songs project, it changed.
What is the 100 Songs project?
The 100 Songs project was something that I did when I graduated college. I was in a major existential crisis because I felt like creatively I felt like I had lost everything, because that was the first time in my life that I found a community of artists that I really resonated with, and then suddenly it had become like a diaspora. I think I said that word correctly.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Okay.
So we'll go with it.
And it had become that. And everybody was scattered. And I also felt guilty about doing creative things because there was a lot of pressure. I think there's a lot of pressure on most people when they graduate college to like just stop revolving their lives around art because it can't necessarily be monetized, but I don't really agree with that. I think it's easy to monetize if you try. Kinda. If you're open-minded.
It's a different type of hard work.
Yes.
You know, it's not ditch digging.
Right.
But it's hard emotional work.
Yes. Yeah. And it also just depends like what is hard for you as an individual, because there are things that are easy for me that are very hard for other people, like emotionally, to withstand, like performing. Like a lot of people are terrified of public speaking. But what's easy for them is like sitting at a desk for 8 hours.
Right.
Which I did briefly, and it was the biggest existential crisis of my life, which is how the 100 Songs project happened. So I realized, like, I'm at a literal fork in the road. I don't know why I said literal, because it was certainly not a literal fork in the road. Like, I am very much at a fork in the road, at a crossroads, where this is either the end of my having been an artist, and now I'm either on this path to be this adult who's like, oh yeah, back in the day I was a singer and I coulda, shoulda, woulda, like, done more with it, or this is the beginning of like an elaborate and fantastical story. Those are the only two options, because I can only think in extremes.
Right.
And so I was like, I suppose this is the beginning of a fantastical story. But I also like was like kind of like logistically sort of trapped, because my degree is in communications because that felt like a good idea because I was like, that's very broad. But in reality, like, it's very broad. So I really didn't know what to do. So I was like, okay, well, like, while I figure it out, I'll just write 100 songs in a year. Because then by the time the year ends, I'll be this fantastic songwriter. I'll have totally rewired my brain to be more creative than ever before. And I should have my shit together by then. If I did the math right, I think it'll work out. So it kind of worked out that way. So I wrote about 300 songs and I became an EDM producer because 49 songs in, I was like, I don't know if I have enough topics anymore. Like, these songs, like, a lot of them are very bad. They're just lame. So I was like, well, I never said they had to have lyrics.
Okay.
So then I just started making EDM songs. And that's how now I have an and classical and jazz a little bit. So that's how now I have this alter ego on Spotify with, like, all of that. And there's one rap song that I made as a joke. But it's, like, kind of good.
Sometimes those end up being the good ones.
Yes, and there's actually a serious version on my album.
Okay.
It's the song Sunshine. That's a love song about Danny DeVito because it was a pun, like Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Just as a joke. But like, it's good. So, but yeah, but during the 100 Songs project, and since then, because it really did, I think, rewire my brain, like in terms of brain plasticity, because it put me in the habit of writing, where before it wasn't a habit, it was literally once a season thing.
Gotcha.
So during that time, I forced myself, when I was feeling things, to write about them, which I had never done before. So that was when it started becoming more like direct. And I remember I have a lot of songs that they sound like breakup and heartbreak songs, but they're actually about like the job that I had at the time, because that's what I was going through.
Right.
So now it's like anything can inspire me. Sometimes indirectly, sometimes very directly. But that's only been the past like few years. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, did any of those 100 songs, did any of them make it to an album, make it to the stage?
Yeah.
Things like that?
Song 51.
Okay.
Song 51 was the first one that was good, and it's out of reach on the album. It was one of the singles. But yeah, for a long time that was called Song 51. And then, and then all the other ones on the album, there are 2 from long before that, and then the rest are way more recent.
Okay.
So, but yeah, Song 51 is the best one from the project.
Gotcha. So let's talk a little bit about the album.
Yeah.
First of all, how did you start coming together? What was the original ideas that led you to put? Because there's a lot of thought more than people realize that go into an album.
Yeah.
As if what songs go there, what the feel of the whole thing is, what the flow of the whole thing is.
Yeah.
All that sort of thing. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think the album is probably the best example of like what we were talking about before we were recording about just life being a series of mistakes and making them look intentional. Because so the album was supposed to be like an EDM pop, like Taylor Swift sounding thing. It's obviously not. So I just had a lot of situations with producers that logistically did not work out. And because of that, I was like, okay, maybe, like during that time, I was performing just with the piano myself, and all these people were running up to me being like, where can I listen to this? And I kept being like, you can't, but there will be a synth pop album out like ASAP. And that kept not working out, and but at the same time, I was feeling increasingly validated about the idea of just putting out an acoustic thing.
Okay.
And I think a turning point for me with that was I was playing the Pine Ridge Fest, and this guy ran up to me and he gave me $50, and he was like, "You should get $50 for what you just did, and it would be $100 if my wife let me." and I was like, "Wow." And I was all happy, and then he asked me about an album, and I was like, "Oh, like, it's going to be out soon, but it's probably going to sound pretty different from that." And he was like, "If you just did that, like, that would be great." And he seemed like, I think it was a matter of, like, him putting his money where his I just thought, like, he gave me $50, so that's genuine. Yeah. And so then, like, like, a month later, I just, like, contacted my friend who, like, was recording in his basement. Like, he mixes things, but he doesn't master. But I was thinking, like, I don't really, and this is, like, kind of controversial, but I was like, I don't really need mastering. It's just a piano and a voice.
Right.
So why don't I just go and, like, do it in one take? And it was going to be an EP. So at this point, I was going to put out an EP just to have something out and then still make a synth pop debut album. So I contacted my friend and I was like, let's make an acoustic EP just, like, so people can hear my stuff whenever they want. And so I go there and I record it and it's all good. It's done. And then I realized that, like, my songs are accidentally all, like, 7 minutes long.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, even though this is 4 songs, it's the length of an album.
Yeah.
It's 28 minutes. So then I messaged him and I was like, why don't I just slap another 4 songs on it, make it a debut album? I got hundreds.
Yeah.
And then he was like, okay. So then I remember the day of, it was a weird day because I had a show in New York that night, but I was an actor in a haunted house. So I had, like, a haunted house rehearsal, like, in Pennsylvania in the morning. And then, like, my friends were all playing indie rock fest, like, in between the 2 destinations in the afternoon. And I was trying to, like, be social. So I was like, okay, this is perfect. I'll just, like, record the second half of the album right before indie rock fest, right after the haunted house. And then, like, I think when I get, like, in that energy of, like, things are happening, I get hit with inspiration. So then in the car, like, I started writing another song, and I was like, yeah, like, this is a way to timestamp, like, how I'm feeling today. Like, I need, because there's so much on the album from, like, years ago.
Right.
And I was like, I need something that represents how I'm feeling right now in September 2021. So one of the songs in the album was written the day of recording. And I just reached a point where I figured, like, I'm just, like, not gonna plan anything. I'm just gonna let this album be whatever it wants to be, because people like authenticity. So it's absolutely not planned to the extent that, like, albums generally are, but that's the planning of it. It's just, like, everything, like, things that I tried to plan just kept not working out, and I took it reached a point where I took it as a sign to just wing it.
Yeah. So that song that you wrote, On the Way.
Yeah.
So it made it to the album?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all that you need. Like,
yeah.
Of that spark,
right.
And it can happen at any time.
Right, and then that song. Sorry, I obviously didn't play beforehand. I also didn't play it after because I forgot it. And I don't like listening to myself. So I didn't want to listen to it to relearn it. So I just let it go. But then I did a vinyl project last week where like I let people request whichever song from the album they wanted, and then I recorded a take per person. It's personalized, like you say their name and everything. And somebody requested that song, so I had to relearn it. So now I guess it's in the mix, and but I learned it the day of because I procrastinated it because I didn't want to listen to myself.
Gotcha.
But people like it because they asked for it on vinyl.
Yeah. Right. But have you ever listened to a song of yours? And I've experienced this with either a film I've done or a piece of art, where you do go back and listen to something that might be a year or two or more old, and your experience of it presently is way different than how you either came up with it or experienced it in that moment.
Yes. Toxic Phantom, the title track from the album, is my favorite for that reason that I've ever written. And also, I can listen to that one no problem for some reason. Yeah, when I wrote that song, I wasn't sure what it was about. It was very, very, very like I was having a waking dream and translating it. And I remember it was winter, and like I was very depressed because it was winter, more or less. And I remember afterward looking at it and thinking, what is this about? Because I know it resonates with me, but I'm not sure why. It's very similar to like if you hear a song on the radio and you're like, oh, this is a nice, like, what does this mean? Like it was like I didn't feel like I wrote it.
Right.
And I remember thinking that it was a triple meaning. I think from my like subconscious perspective, I think I was mostly writing it about like depression and like just mental anguish, generally speaking, and how like it always resurfaces, but it's also a double-edged sword. And like we were talking about, like kind of the catalyst for a lot of art, and very positive in that way. But so in that sense, it's kind of a toxic relationship because it's like codependent. Like you need it to be what you are. And so I don't think I wrote it about, I didn't write it directly about an interpersonal relationship, but I remember thinking, oh, this could apply to literally any literal toxic relationship between people. And also, I think it's like a metaphor for any sort of addiction. Literally any dependency that is negative or hurtful in some way. But I wrote that 8 years ago. So now, like almost a decade later, listening to it and having had more experiences, I remember a few years ago singing it I remember singing it after I had broken up with someone, and I knew like some of the people that were there, and they were like, oh, we know who, I remember somebody saying like, we know who this is about. And I remember thinking, that's very interesting because it's not at all. Like this is way older than that relationship. But I understand why they think that because it fits perfectly. And I remember like thinking about that relationship while I was playing it and feeling like I had written it about that, even though I didn't. Right. So that song, it's just like it always applies, but it always applies to something different.
Yeah, and I think that's a sign of what is of a good song and good songwriting is that it can continue to live.
Yes.
You know, and be a little timeless.
Yeah.
And evolve. So your own writing evolved with you, but even in the minds of others. Yeah,
right. I call that song My Purple Rain because like how like as of now, and I hope I have another purple rain Like, because I'd be sad if, like, that's the best. Because, like, oh, yeah, like, I'd be sad if just years go by and, like, for the rest of my life, my favorite song that I've ever written is, like, the first one that I ever wrote. But, yeah, as of now, like, that's my Purple Rain. Like how that song just never got old for Prince.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Gotcha. So, like, what would you say, like, if the vibe or the feel of Toxic Phantom is?
Ambient.
Okay.
Which is funny because I do not like ambient music. Like, for a while I was calling my genre, because I think Toxic Phantom is defining of my genre. For a while I was calling that vibe goth pop.
Okay.
But it's also like there's a part of me that wants that to be a jazz standard someday. So the other day somebody asked me what my genre is, because I like to walk up to strangers and be like, I'm gonna be famous in 3 weeks, help me become famous, listen to my album. And so I was doing that, and somebody asked me what my genre is, and I said, today I'm going to tell you that it's gothic neo-soul, but ask me next week and, like, I won't say that. I'll say something else. So that's what I would say the vibe is. All of those descriptions combined.
Well, no, being familiar with those genres,
yeah.
I can see that. I can feel like it fits.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, because, like, I'm kind of, like, right now accidentally in a neo-soul band. Okay. Just everything in my life is an accident. Like, I have said before, like, when I write, like, when I am famous and I write an autobiography, it's probably going to be called Showing Up Uninvited, because, like, everywhere that I've ever been in my life, I have been there uninvited. Everything that's ever happened, I've been uninvited. Like, I just stumble into things. Like, including this neo-soul band. So I was just, like, on the sidewalk.
Right.
For context, I was outside of a mic that I had just played at, and these people had also played at it.
Okay. So it wasn't a random sidewalk.
No, it's never random. I just enjoy. I just get enjoyment from describing things in the most, like, absurd way possible.
That's fun. Good for the show.
Right, exactly. It, like, I do it subconsciously, but then when people, like, really ask me about the details of things, I'm like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I think subconsciously I was adding a little bit of embellishment for fun.
That's part of being an artist.
Right.
It's part of being an artist.
Right, yeah. But yeah, no, like, I became friends with this band, and they'd formed recently, and they were like, we could use a pianist and a singer. They have a singer, but now we, like, sing together. And like, I don't think of myself as that genre, but whenever I collaborate with people who are that genre, it becomes undeniably evident that I kind of am. Yeah.
No, I think that now, musically, we're in a time when the best stuff that's coming out is the combination of genres.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we've hit, however far back you want to go, we've hit a lot of bases musically as a people.
Yeah.
And most of the new artists that I'm interested in now are ones that don't really fit one particular genre. It's interesting to me to hear two things that I might not have thought to put together.
Yeah.
And put them together. And it could be like the two things could possibly be things I would not listen to by themselves.
Right.
But you hear them combined, and it's just, sometimes even the fact that it's just different is enough.
That's true.
To spark my interest and give it a chance.
Yeah.
And then you like it, you don't like it, you go from there.
Yeah.
But that's cool, of the combining of genres. So, yeah, Like, I would lean into the gothic neo soul
Yeah.
deal if it works for you.
Yeah. The gothic thing is interesting to navigate as a marketing strategy because it's a part-time situation. Like,
Okay.
so I feel like in the whole conversation of genres, this is very relevant. I basically I started making music because I couldn't help it, but I started making music in the fashion that I started in primarily because of My Chemical Romance.
Okay.
Yeah, when I heard Welcome to the Black Parade, I was 11, and that was the first time that I felt my favorite feeling.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the best way I can describe it. There's a feeling that is the reason I make art, and it is the feeling that I felt when I heard that song. And so for years, I just revolved my self-concept around this idea that I would emulate Gerard Way from My Chemical Romance. And I just thought that I was going to be this pop punk rock star. I was very, 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 very into Simple Plan and Good Charlotte, Paramore. And then I was in a pop punk band in high school, and then when I was in college, I was in a pop punk band that had so many members of different styles that it became a metal band.
Okay.
And it was weird because I was on the piano in a metal band, but it was a synthesizer, so I just changed the settings and played the bass part. And then I turned my house into a metal venue, basically.
Okay.
Which went very well and then went very badly because one of my roommates was a business major, and there were holes kicked in the ceiling, there were furnaces moshed into.
Right.
Had to I was very upset at the time. Now it's
metal stuff was happening.
Yeah. Yes. And now it's fun. It's my favorite party story to tell. Mm-hmm. But at the time I was devastated.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I wasn't really known for my talent back then. Not that I was seen as not having it. It was just, that wasn't the selling point. The selling point was that I act crazy and jump around on stage. It's a basement. Right. Because that's fun. And so I also think that was when I realized that part of my marketing is the fact that I come off dark and spooky, but I'm anything but that, and that surprises people because it's an unexpected juxtaposition. And I think that my marketing is in the fact that I don't match myself. But that, and just logistically, it was not sustainable. And also being in college, I was playing music with a lot of people that didn't want to do it professionally. So I kind of got forced over time into being solo if I wanted to do it as something more than a hobby. And so that was how I just fell into my sound that I have now. Okay. But yeah, the goth thing, it's I never wanted to be goth or emo or anything like that. I never thought of myself that way. I just always have gravitated toward that extremely, and accidentally kind of embodied it. Mm-hmm. But because it's not intentional, I have days or weeks or whatever where I'm just not that at all. It's just it just comes very naturally to me to do that sometimes and not all the time. But on those days, like, I'll like show up not looking emo and then playing like Adele covers. And then if people follow you on Instagram and your bio is like goth pop, they're like, what are you talking about? And so that is a weird thing to navigate, because I could box myself into like, I'm officially goth, I'm going to dress goth intentionally every time I perform.
Right.
But that's disingenuous.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I forget what the original question was, but I think I answered it.
You did. You got it. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Planet Shivers podcast. Don't forget, you can find out more on what Casey is up to on Instagram at Casey Raniero. And Casey has a bunch of different shows coming up. First of all, Sunday, May 8th at 7 p.m. at The Fire in Philadelphia. Wednesday, May 11th, Visual Arts Showcase at Lacidia Center in the East Village. That's at 8 p.m. Friday, May 13th at 7 p.m., the Sankofa House in Philadelphia. Saturday, May 14th, Flemington DIY Grand Reopening Makers Market from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. in Flemington, New Jersey. Friday, May 20th, Casey will be joining the Rage Tones on tour at the Pharmacy in Philadelphia. Saturday, May 21st, Casey will be performing at Vibes and Verses Showcase from 5 to 10 in Trenton, New Jersey. And finally, Tuesday, May 24th, she will be joining the Rage Tones again on tour at Club Odyssey in Winetta, New York. You can catch Casey at all those places coming up. And you can find out more of what I'm up to on Instagram at Albert Shivers and www.albertshivers.com. You can find more episodes of the podcast on all major podcast platforms and YouTube. And don't forget to like and subscribe. All these numbers, it's all a numbers game with Al Gore's rhythm. It's all a numbers game. Likes and subscribes really do help out and help elevate the show, not just for me, but for all the guests and the people who are on it. To help get them out there, help spread everybody all around. Spread the love like butter. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of somebody else.